Chapter 4 of Out from the Heart by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 4 Doing and Knowing. Let a man realize that his life, in its totality, proceeds from his mind. Let him realize that the mind is a combination of habits, which he can, by patient effort, modify to any extent, and over which he can thus gain complete ascendancy, mastery, and control. At once he will have obtained possession of the key which shall open the door to his complete emancipation. But freedom from the ills of life, which are the ills of one's mind, is a matter of steady growth from within, and not a sudden acquisition from without. Hourly and daily must the mind be trained to think stainless thoughts, and adapt right and dispassionate attitudes under those circumstances in which it is prone to fall into wrong and passion. Like the patient sculptor upon his marble, the aspirant to the right life must gradually work upon the crude material of his mind until he has wrought out of it the ideal of his holiest dreams. In working towards such supreme accomplishment, it is necessary to begin at the lowest and easiest steps, and proceed by natural, progressive stages to the higher and more difficult. The law of growth, progress, evolution, and unfoldment, by gradual and ever ascending stages, is absolute in every department of life, and in every human accomplishment. Where it is ignored, total failure will result. In acquiring education, in learning a trade, or in pursuing a business, this law is fully recognized and minutely obeyed by all. But in acquiring virtue, in learning truth, and in pursuing the right conduct and knowledge of life, it is unrecognized and disobeyed by nearly all. Hence virtue, truth, and the perfect life remain unpracticed, unacquired, and unknown. It is a common error to suppose that the higher life is a matter of reading and the adoption of theological or metaphysical hypotheses, and that the spiritual principles can be understood by this method. The higher life is higher living, in thought, word, and deed, and the knowledge of those spiritual principles, which are immanent in man and in the universe, can only be acquired after long discipline in the pursuit and practice of virtue. The lesser must be thoroughly grasped and understood before the greater can be known. Practice always precedes real knowledge. The schoolmaster never attempts to teach his pupils the abstract principles of mathematics at the start. He knows that such a method of teaching would be in vain and learning impossible. He first places before them a simple sum, and having explained it, leaves them to do it. When after repeated failures and ever renewed effort they have succeeded in doing it correctly, a more difficult task is set before them, and then another and another. It is not until the pupils have, through many years of diligent application, mastered all the lessons in arithmetic, that he attempts to unfold to them the underlying mathematical principles. In learning a trade, say that of a mechanic, a boy is not at first taught the principles of mechanics, but a simple tool is put in his hand, and he is told how to rightly use it. He is then left to do it by effort and practice. As he succeeds in plying his tools correctly, more and more difficult tasks are set before him, until after years of successful practice he is prepared to study and grasp the principles of mechanics. In a properly governed household, the child is first taught to be obedient, and to conduct himself properly under all circumstances. The child is not even told why he must do this, but is commanded to do it. Only after he has far succeeded in doing what is right and proper is he told why he should do it. No father would attempt to teach his child the principles of ethics before extracting from him the practice of family duty and social virtue. Thus practice ever precedes knowledge even in the ordinary things of the world, and in spiritual things, in the living of the higher life, this law is rigid in its demands. Virtue can only be known by doing, and the knowledge of truth can only be arrived at by perfecting oneself in the practice of virtue. To be complete in the practice and acquisition of virtue is to be complete in the knowledge of truth. Truth can only be arrived at by daily and hourly doing the lessons of virtue, beginning with the simplest and passing on to the more difficult. A child patiently and obediently learns his lessons at school by constantly practicing and ever exerting himself until all failures and difficulties are surmounted. Likewise does the child of truth, undaunted by failure and made stronger by difficulties, apply himself to right doing in thought and action. As he succeeds in acquiring virtue, his mind unfolds itself in the knowledge of truth, and it is a knowledge in which he can securely rest. End of Chapter 4. Recording by Andrea Fiore.